how did you get into kind of like blogging and sharing your experience? Like, how did you end up in that whole thing on the internet?
I've always liked writing, which is funny. I am not, in terms of writing, I'm good at getting my ideas out. I'm not always great at like proofreading and making sure they're all like perfectly spelled and punctuated. And I mess up an Oxford comma from time to time, and which can really make sentences mean very different things. So I like structurally, grammatically, and all of that. I'm not always the best writer in that sense, but I always really liked writing and just putting my thoughts out there. And I started sharing some different things on my personal page, like where I would like promote, like I started off just being like, hey, you know, like talking about like we shouldn't stigmatize mental health medication or things like that. And I started just sharing little small things, and like people in my friendship circle and people who I was friends with on Facebook were like, this is really relatable and you should do this on a bigger scale. And I thought, you know what, like, why not? I don't do anything for myself. And I decided to start just writing a little bit about a lot of different topics. Even I remember I was selling my house at the time, and I, you know, so I really did just even talk about like, oh, this is what this is like, you know, selling my house with small kids. And like, here's some things I did to make it easier. And here's what I did, you know, like how I put their stuff away so I could just have 1 million showings in a day and it was fine. Or, you know, how I could make my house look less lived in by children. So I did a lot of different topics. And then one day I did just decide to share an abbreviated version of my story. And I didn't, you know, necessarily, go through it like I just did on this video. To that extent, I wrote that more one about uterine rupture and like, here's like 7 things I didn't really realize about it and what I wish other people knew. And I kind of just bulleted it out and did that. And then that picked up. That was shared on a few different more like prominent sites and blogging sites. And that's where I got a few people who follow those sites, but then troll them, got a hold of my page. So then I all of a sudden, and I was so oblivious to this like underground world of people who are really like natural birth fanatics. And I had no idea they existed. And all of a sudden I just seemingly just share my story. And there's all these people, thousands of people, like just commenting, hundreds probably, but it was shared thousands of times. And then I had all these people on my page basically telling me that they would either blame me and tell me that I did something wrong is because I didn't like, you know, that I had somehow done something wrong, or they had told me that I was fear mongering or making things up and stuff. And I was constantly being told I was fear mongering, and all I was doing was sharing my story and talking about like, wow, it is really important. I can't emphasize enough how important things like continuous fetal monitoring are, and being in a hospital with the equipment needed to help you, and getting your making sure that you can be transferred into surgery in the whole, I am 5 minutes away from the hospital, how that's not okay, how that isn't really true for an emergency. And that's simply all I was sharing. And I was just getting an onslaught of attacks. Well, because of that, that's where some of you guys that were in the VBAC groups jumped on to like help me, being like, this is a newer like blogger in person sharing her story and she's getting attacked, go help her. Basically, like so that's when I first got introduced to Candace and Stella and so many different people who came on, and there was actually multiple. And I think Marissa, you might have even been one of them too. There's definitely people jumped right on my page and were telling basically people like she can share her story and what she's saying is true. And that started opening my eyes. And then there was even like people were sharing like graphics of like the ones of like, you know, really there's leading people off a cliff basically in this community, the natural community and things. And all of a sudden it hit me like a ton of bricks, like, wow, there's this whole problematic movement around birth and pregnancy. And I had no idea. And that's when I just started to dive into it a little more. So that's what inspired me, right? I have largely stepped away from it. I still have all my content. I have it all saved. I have everything. I have it kind of archived at this point. For me, I found this would have been, it's like 3.5 years I did my blog. And in the last year, I found myself just really struggling to find the energy to put towards it. And it started to feel more like a burden than it was helpful. So what I think I'm going to do for now is and actually when I decided to archive it for now, I had this immediate sense of relief. So I was like, okay, you know, that's your brain and body's way of telling you like, this is really not for you right now. You don't need to like stress yourself into maintaining this. I really appreciate doing like this as a side project. So I'm like, oh, I just want to utilize, you know, my voice, my advocacy in different ways. And I would like to collaborate with other people, but not be the lead of it, like the lead of my webpage. And then I also think what I'm going to do is take the ones that I made that are more specific and helpful and just saving them into files to save in VBAC to reference to, because oftentimes my like rupture story has been bumped up for people like and it's just a direct link to my blog, but in taking it down, I think I'm going to just kind of save those so that I can share them with anybody or, you know, or I might just share it in like a long format in VBAC so that that post can just get bumped for anyone who would want to see it and just tagged under that. So that's how I'm kind of doing that now, but that's how I got into it, is just that. And then my interest in more of the work we're doing here now and what we're discussing and all of that really came from that day of sharing that and being like, oh, wow, it really opened my eyes to how vicious people can be in defense of natural childbirth and all of that.
Well, that's good. I was curious about that because I wanted to hear how you ended up getting involved and how you shared. That's funny. That's pretty much how it always happens, though, is that they hear about it, the natural birth people, and then they just slam you. And then here comes other people come like, oh no. So that's funny.
I have no regrets because it's gotten me it introduced me to so many people that now that I'm in, you know, and it was so if it took the people converging on me and me walking right into the lion's den, it's fine because it's really connected me to things that have been meaningful for me and people who are meaningful.
The thing about it is it's kind of weird though, because like one of the problems I have with the whole natural childbirth mindset is that they don't really judge any case on its merits, and they'll judge you by who you're associated with. And oh, if you're associated with that person, then obviously you are up to no good. It's like, and you did not voluntarily associate yourself with anybody. And it's like you're still being attacked. It's like, wait a second, what happened? What did I do? Mm-hmm. And you didn't do anything. And that's one of the things that I find so annoying about that culture is like, do you guys actually pay attention to what's being said? Or is it just like, oh, we must defend our honor as natural childbirth enthusiasts and attack people who, I don't know, because they exist. They wrote one blog post about something that really happened to them.
I struggle though. The thing, and let me tell you, the thing that is, I can't even begin to tell you the nasty things that were hurled at me. Some of the stuff was just horrible that was said to me. But really just the thing that irritates me always to this day the most is when people just say I'm fear mongering. I hate that because I'm like, I'm not. It's literally my lived experience. I'm just sharing what happened to me. I don't have the power to, if you're telling me it makes you feel nervous, good, maybe it should. If you were planning on having an HVAC in your backyard and a pool and a kiddie pool, and now suddenly me just sharing my story has made you second guess that, then good, I'm glad. And I'm not going to call that fear mongering. That's literally true. Informed consent is hearing all sides of it and just hearing that this can happen and seeing, yes, I know it's much easier to read, oh, that it's just this tiny percentage of people this happens to, than it is to actually see someone talking about, you know, I watched my baby on a ventilator. Like, it's a lot easier to not have to be faced with it outside of a statistic. So that's the thing that always grinds my gears a little, is when people say that. I'm like, I don't have the power to fear monger. I don't. Me sharing my story is like, it's fact. It's what happened. It's like the sun rises in the east. Like, it is what it is. If you're telling me that it's making you nervous, then you have some other things that you need to process, or you need to, maybe there's reason for it. Maybe your plan isn't as safe as you thought it was going to be. that's not on me. I'm not fear mongering. I don't have the it's just my lived experience. This is just what happened to me. I'm sorry it's inconvenient to you that, you know, somebody who is young and took care of herself and didn't have anything that was otherwise, you know, a cofactor in that also ruptured. I know that probably is upsetting to a narrative that if you, again, do all of these things, you're in control. And that's what a lot of the natural childbirth community, that's almost like the basis of it, is that if you just do X, Y, and Z, you're in control of your outcome. If you just hire this doula and you have this environment that you're giving birth in, and you don't have the presence of this intervention and the cascade of interventions, which we know is a lie. But if you don't have all of these things and you instead have these things and you've done this, then you're likely going to get this outcome. It's all about that. So if you have somebody who, I think that's why someone like me is more startling, because I didn't have anything that is, but that just goes to show you a rupture really can happen to anybody. It really can. It can happen. Obviously, it's primarily happening to people with with a prior C-section. And then there's things that increase it. But I think my story was why I was attacked so much is because it was inconvenient to them that there wasn't a bunch of things they could pinpoint. Well, oh, you had 3 prior C-sections, or you had, this, and this. It was like, no, on paper, I shouldn't have ruptured, but I did. And that's inconvenient to the narrative that it's very unlikely that it will happen to you. So